"Get out, you low life," my mother said. I had just turned the key in my apartment door. My hand was still on the handle. The lock hadn't clicked yet. Time seemed to stall in that unfinished moment, like the world itself was waiting to see if I would complete the action or retreat. I didn't move. Inside, my living room lights were on. I never left them on. Electricity was something I'd been trained to respect, trained by years of being told money didn't grow on trees while quietly funding the forest. My mother stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, jaw set, already decided. She looked calm, settled, like someone who had rehearsed this scene and finally reached opening night. Behind her, my sister Camille sat on my couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. She was drinking coffee from my favorite mug, the chipped blue one I'd had since my first apartment. I noticed everything. The way my mother had moved my armchair closer to the window. The way my throw blanket was folded differently. The way my space no longer felt like mine. "You really thought this was permanent?" my mother continued. 30 years old and still nothing to show for it. Camille laughed softly. "No degree. No title. No purpose," she added. "It's actually impressive how little you've done." I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. My body reacted before my mind could. My fingers went numb. A buzzing filled my ears. My vision narrowed until the edges blurred, like I was looking through a tunnel. This wasn't shock. It was familiarity. I had felt this before, many times, usually in smaller doses. A comment at dinner. A joke at my expense in front of relatives. A casual dismissal of my work, my time, my effort. But this was different. This was eviction. My mother brushed past me and threw open my bedroom door. The room looked wrong in a way my brain couldn't process at first. Too clean. Too empty. Like a hotel room stripped between guests. My books were gone. My clothes were gone. The framed photos of my childhood, me at 6 holding a library certificate, me at 10 with my first computer, gone. Even the shoebox of letters my grandmother wrote me before she died was missing. "What did you do?" I asked finally, my voice thin. "We cleared it out," my mother said. "You're not a child anymore. You don't need sentimental junk." Camille finally looked up, smiling. "We donated most of it," she said. "You should be grateful. Someone who actually matters might use it." That was the moment. Not when they insulted me. Not when they erased my room. But when they spoke about my life like excess inventory. I bent down, picked up my purse, and walked out. Behind me, my mother shouted, "Don't come crawling back when you realize the real world doesn't care about feelings." I closed the door softly. I walked for 3 blocks before I realized I was shaking. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. I sat on a bus bench and stared at the pavement, trying to regulate my breathing like my therapist once taught me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years. Crying had never changed anything in my family. It only made things worse, gave them proof that I was weak, dramatic, emotional. So I learned early how to swallow pain and label it maturity. From the outside, my family looked enviable, church-going, respectable, successful. My parents loved appearances, loved hosting, loved being admired. Their house was always perfect, staged like a magazine spread. My mother ironed pillowcases. My father washed his car every Saturday like it was a ritual. Camille fit into that image effortlessly. She was loud, confident, ambitious, the kind of person who could fail upward because people liked how she spoke. I was the opposite. Quiet, observant, useful. I was the one who fixed things. When my father's consulting business started bleeding money, I noticed before anyone else. When invoices stopped coming in, I quietly transferred funds. When my mother's credit cards maxed out at boutiques she couldn't pronounce, I paid the balances without asking questions. When Camille moved to Los Angeles for opportunity, and found rent she couldn't afford instead, I wired money every month like clockwork. No one called it abuse. They called it family. And I believed them. Because when you grow up being treated like the spare part, you internalize the idea that love has a cost. That your presence must be earned. So you pay. You pay in silence. You pay in cash. You pay by shrinking. I drove an old car while Camille leased luxury vehicles. I wore simple clothes so no one would ask questions. I lived below my means so they could live beyond theirs. And all the while my parents told people, Rose is still figuring things out. They never asked what I actually did. They never wanted to know. 3 days after they erased me, Camille texted. Dinner Friday. Don't be late. No apology. No explanation. Just expectation. I knew exactly why. They always needed me eventually. The restaurant was expensive in the kind of way meant to intimidate. Tiny portions. Heavy plates. Servers trained to laugh at unfunny jokes. My parents were already seated. My mother smiled like nothing had happened. There you are, she said. Sit. No acknowledgement. No guilt. No shame. Halfway through the meal, the check arrived. My father glanced at it, then at me. We're a little tight right now, he said casually. Can you take care of this? There it was. The reflex. The assumption. How much? I asked. 3,000, Camille said lightly. Relax. It's nothing. Nothing. I paid. I photographed the receipt. And something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Awareness. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop I hadn't touched in years. Family support. Inside were spreadsheets, dates, transfers, notes. I had tracked everything instinctively, like someone mapping exits without realizing it. I scrolled. Tuition payments. Emergency bailouts. Credit card rescues. Silent loans never repaid. The final number sat at the bottom. $417,000. That was the cost of my invisibility. I stared at it until the numbers stopped looking abstract and started looking like years of my life. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt done. A week later, my mother called crying. The house. The mortgage. A bank mistake. They needed help. A lot of it. Immediately. I listened quietly. Then I made a call of my own. Not to save them, but to buy something. Something they never thought I could afford. Something they never imagined I would use. The call came at 7:03 a.m. I remember the time because I stared at my phone until it stopped vibrating, then started again. The screen lit up my kitchen counter in short, impatient bursts, like a warning signal I had learned to recognize over decades. Mom calling. I already knew what it was about. Silence had never lasted long in my family. Silence didn't pay bills. Silence didn't maintain appearances. Silence didn't protect the illusion they had spent their lives polishing. I answered on the fourth ring. Rose, my mother said immediately, her voice thin and trembling, already halfway to hysteria. We have a serious situation. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. What kind of situation? I asked. The bank, she rushed on. They sent another letter. They're claiming we're in default. That we've missed payments. It's obviously some kind of clerical error, but they're threatening foreclosure if we don't act quickly. A clerical error. That was her favorite phrase. She used it whenever consequences appeared unexpectedly, like an uninvited guest at a party. How much? I asked. She hesitated. Well, to bring everything current, about 50,000. Maybe a little more, but it's temporary. Just until our lawyer fixes this. Temporary. Just fixes. I let the silence stretch. Rose, she pressed. Are you there? I'm here, I said. I'll think about it. You don't understand, she snapped, the fear already sharpening into irritation. This is our home. I ended the call without responding. That morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't shower. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't distract myself. I sat at my desk and opened a folder I rarely touched. Not family support. This one was called Holdings. Inside were documents my family had never seen, never asked about, never cared enough to imagine existed. NDAs. Acquisition contracts. Wire confirmations. Legal correspondence written in language that assumed competence. 6 years earlier, while my parents were busy comparing lawn services with their neighbors and Camille was busy curating her image online, I had quietly built a software company. Not flashy. Not trendy. Useful. It solved a boring problem. Last-mile logistics inefficiencies. It helped companies move goods faster, cheaper, cleaner. It scaled without drama. It attracted the kind of attention that doesn't need press releases. I never told my family. Why would I? They never listened when I spoke about anything that didn't involve fixing their problems. The buyout happened quietly. $98 million after taxes and fees. I didn't celebrate. I didn't upgrade my life. I didn't post about it. I didn't even buy a new car. I just stopped worrying. And I waited. At 8:15 a.m., I called my attorney. I want to acquire a distressed mortgage note, I said. There was a pause. Rose, he said carefully, that's your parents' address. I know. If you buy it, you become the lender. You control the debt. Yes. You understand what that means? I understand exactly what it means. Another pause. You're sure this isn't about revenge? I thought about my bedroom. My donated belongings. My mother's voice telling me I took up space I hadn't earned. It's about accountability, I said. Proceed. The process moved faster than I expected. By Thursday, my legal team had identified both the primary mortgage and the high-interest second loan my parents had taken out 3 years earlier without telling me. By Friday, both were mine. Purchased cleanly. Legally. Quietly. Through a holding company. My name nowhere near it. They didn't know. They assumed the bank's silence meant luck. They always mistook mercy for entitlement. My father called Saturday morning. We need to meet, he said. No greeting. No warmth. Immediately. I arrived an hour later. The house looked the same as always. Manicured lawn, expensive car, tasteful decorations chosen to impress people who never stayed long enough to notice the cracks. Inside, tension clung to the walls. My mother paced the living room, wringing her hands. Camille sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, visibly annoyed that her weekend had been disrupted by money stress. My father sat at the head of the dining table like a man waiting to be saved. Sit, he ordered. I stayed standing. The bank is being unreasonable, he began, launching into a speech he'd clearly rehearsed. They're claiming we're behind. It's obviously a mistake related to refinancing. How much? I asked. 50,000, my mother said quickly. Just to hold them off. Camille scoffed. You have savings. You always do. And if I don't? I asked. My father stood up, his face hardening. Then you're selfish, he snapped. After everything we've done for you. There it was. The lever they always pulled. Pay, or be erased. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I'll be back Monday. Relief flooded the room. They thought they'd won. On Monday morning, I arrived at exactly 9 a.m. I wore a tailored blazer. Neutral. Calm. Precise. I didn't sit. I placed a leather folder on the table and slid it forward. My father frowned. What's this? Documentation, I said. Regarding the house. He opened it. His hands started shaking. "What is this?" he whispered. "The deed," I said. "And the mortgage note." Camille stood up abruptly. "What are you talking about?" "I purchased the debt," I said evenly. "The bank sold it. I bought it." My mother gasped. "You? How could you afford?" "I sold my company last year," I said. "For just under 100 million. The room went silent. Not dramatic. Empty. My father collapsed into his chair. Camille's phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. "You're lying," she whispered. "I'm your landlord," I corrected. "They tried everything." My mother cried until her voice broke. My father argued, threatened, pleaded. Camille accused me of betrayal, cruelty, narcissism. I listened. Then I handed them the notice. 30 days. No extensions. No negotiations. 3 weeks later, I stood barefoot on the balcony of my beach house in Miami. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, calm and indifferent. Behind me, my phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. Some stories don't need a final argument. They end when you walk away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't paying rent for existing. I was free. And that was worth everything. Moral lessons. This story is a reminder that family is not defined by blood, but by respect. Love that only exists when you are useful is not love. It is exploitation. If you are constantly giving, fixing, sacrificing, and shrinking yourself just to be tolerated, that is not loyalty. It is self-erasure. You are not obligated to destroy your future to preserve someone else's image. Real strength is not endurance without limits. It is knowing when to stop paying the emotional and financial rent for a place where you are not valued. Let this be your encouragement. Your worth is not measured by approval, titles, or degrees, and you do not need permission to choose peace. Walking away from abuse is not cruelty. It is self-respect. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is not anger or punishment, but finally choosing yourself and building a life so solid that no one can ever treat you as disposable again.